this and welcome in Virginia Congressman, also a member of the House Armed Services Committee, Rob Wittman. Congressman, great to have you with us.
John, great to be back with you.
All right, we got your Senate colleague Josh Hawley saying that he is going to stand in the way of any of these nominees so long as Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin are still in those posts. Do you agree with Josh Hawley on this? Is it time to really start standing in the way of this administration until accountability is achieved?
I think accountability should be at the center of what Congress should be doing. And that means not just Secretary Blinken coming to the Hill, trying to portray this as a success. Anybody that looks at the withdrawal from Afghanistan, John, knows this is not a success. It was a catastrophic failure. It was a dereliction of duty. And we want to be able to not only hear from Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin, but I want to hear from others. I want to make sure that we have a platform to be able to subpoena folks to come in and give us the details of what happened so we can hold people accountable. That's why I think the bill that Elise Stefanik and I have in, which would create a 9/11 style commission on Afghanistan, would let us get to the facts, let us get to the truth. And from that, I think we create a foundation to hold people accountable, because I want to know where all these connections go. Just as you pointed out, when you start to hear Secretary Austin and Secretary Blinken now start to redirect blame on this to others, then that tells me there's something bigger going on than just those two individuals. I want to make sure we understand that, because that's the only way they're going to hold people accountable, and we must get to the truth and the facts.
How disappointing is it for you that Secretary Austin chose not to come and appears unwilling to do so unless he is in fact subpoenaed? I mean, I think if we need to hear from him as well.
I think so too. He was part of the decision-making group there that advised the president. I want to know, what did he advise the president to do? What did the president follow, or what did the president not follow? What were the details of what he provided? Also, I want to understand, why we find ourselves in this situation where we abandoned Bagram, where we left $83 billion worth of military equipment behind. Somebody has to answer for that. This was not a military decision. This was a political decision. And I want to hear from our military leaders, the Secretary of Defense, as to how this decision took place. And what did he do if he felt otherwise to resist this and tell the president, no, this was the wrong direction to go? The only way we know about that is for him to come in and testify directly.
One of the things, too, we heard yesterday from Secretary Blinken, and, he kind of bragged about the group they have working inside the UN Security Council, which is also, a lie, because China and Russia, also permanent members of that committee, they always want to kind of jab us on this, and they've been using that drone strike to push back against us and standing in the way of some of these resolutions where you would normally have unity on that panel here. And that's why this drone strike is so important. And Senator Rand Paul brought that up yesterday, and here's that exchange.
The administration is, of course, reviewing that strike, and I'm sure that a full assessment will be forthcoming.
So you don't know if it was an aid worker or an ISIS-K operative?
I can't speak to that.
Guess what? Maybe you created hundreds or thousands of new potential terrorists from bombing the wrong people. So you got to know who we can't sort of have an investigation after we kill people. We have an investigation before we kill people.
I mean, we've got the 13 Americans who were killed, untold allies right now who are being executed as the Taliban continues to purge that country of our allies here. And then we have innocent people killed in a drone strike, and you can't get a straight answer from the Secretary of State. Again, this is an issue that demands accountability, and we're getting zero.
Absolutely, John. Across the spectrum, we need to know what was behind this. Was there such a rush to have some kind of strike against ISIS-K because of the 13 military members that were killed that they just set aside any sort of rigor about determining who that person was? And then the other elements of what they've done, the failures there continue to mount. And instead of addressing who's accountable for those failures, they want to continue to misdirect. They want to continue to say, well, we're looking into it, to play out the clock, to extend the attention that's placed on this to the point where they hope that people won't pay attention to it. Listen, I think the American people want us to hold people accountable, and I can tell them that we will continue to focus on what's happening in Afghanistan until everyone is held accountable, until we determine exactly how things happened and why we saw these catastrophic failures there and dereliction of duty.
And how about some accountability on this tax proposal, this spending plan the Democrats have, $3.5 trillion. They don't want any accountability. They want to do it all with Democratic votes through reconciliation. But not only are there tax hikes folded into this, we're also hearing about amnesty for some 8 million people. You know, no wonder they want to do this through reconciliation. It would get zero Republican support.
Exactly. And you watch what they're doing now, John. They are railroading the different parts of this bill through committees. When Republicans are trying to put in very thoughtful amendments that would create some measure of control on what they're doing, all of those measures are voted down. So there's no interest in even including ideas from the minority. The effort is to get this through. And as you said, this is the train that's leaving Washington with this $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill on it. And the only people on that train are Democrats. The majority in the House doesn't care about the thoughts or ideas of the minority Republicans. They're just wishing that this goes through with minimal resistance. Now, listen, I think that they underestimate what their members are going to say and do when that bill comes to the floor. So I think that their members are hearing from folks back home about the $3.5 trillion, the new taxes, the massive amount of additional deficits that we will take on because of that, the massive amount of additional debt that we will take on. And folks back home are looking at this and saying, this is purely a political objective, not about what's best for the United States. I think that you're going to see some hesitancy and hopefully some folks on the other side of the aisle that will say no, they're not going to vote for this $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of money anymore because we just throw it around. That term is mentioned so often, but that is 3.5 times what we spent over the last 20 years in Afghanistan. So just to put it in perspective, and, you know, once upon a time, lawmakers might want some bipartisan buy-in if they were going to make that kind of investment for the American public. Investment, I use that term in air quotes, but Democrats, you know, they have other objectives and they are political. I also wanted to talk to you as well about these vaccine mandates. About a month ago, you started to sound the alarm on the prospect of a shortage of healthcare workers, and we're seeing that now, hospitals putting services on hold because of this vaccine mandate. I mean, even before the vaccine, there was a shortage of nurses, especially nurses and doctors as well in hospitals, and now they want to make it that much harder to hire healthcare workers. And the other question, too, of course, Congressman, is why are healthcare workers so reluctant to get the vaccine?
Exactly. Well, listen, I think the administration has done a horrible job in messaging on the vaccines. They've been inconsistent. And when you're inconsistent, you create distrust in the minds of people. So those, I think, are at the very heart of what they're having to deal with now. And listen, I am adamantly opposed to mandating a vaccine. Listen, I've taken the vaccines. I believe in vaccines, but I also believe that decisions about vaccines, when you are going to inject something into your body, is a decision to be made by your doctor and yourself. The government should not interject itself. And I understand the whole realm of public health because I worked in public health for 27 years. But I also understand how incredibly important it is to make sure that you are bringing people along so they understand about the vaccine and so that there's trust there. That has not happened with this. Now going to the point of creating a situation where people are going to be forcibly injected or make a decision about, well, I'm either going to have to change jobs or do something else. It's not just in healthcare, it's in other critical areas of the nation. I've talked to a number of federal employees who are just livid about this, who are going to have to make a choice between their job and this injection. And for some of them who work in critical areas, they've said, I'm not going to be forced to do something against my will. So I think you will see further reverberations. And as you pointed out, I said months ago that this was going to impact many critical elements of employment across the nation.
Yeah, we focused on a poll earlier this week that showed about 70% of people said they would quit their jobs if this became a thing. You know, I don't know if that's really the case if you were faced with, you know, feeding your family and you're paying your mortgage versus getting the vaccine. But who wants to be in that position? The other thing, too, is when you have public health officials referring to the unvaccinated, maybe they have antibodies, maybe they have a medical condition or religious reason for not getting vaccinated. But when you refer to these people and compare them to drunk drivers, you're not going to change minds. And we'll talk more about the woman who is doing that, comparing the unvaccinated to drunk drivers coming up. But Congressman, thank you so much for your time. Great to see you as always.
John, thank you.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk about Gavin Newsom surviving that recall election.